Okay, you can add in thyme, rosemary, any of these, okay? And that will really amplify the flavor. Okay, so I added in that, and I'm gonna add in a little bit of coriander. You can add in allspice, you can add in clove even, cinnamon. Cinnamon, you would just use a stick in the brine when you bring it to a boil. This is a step that we're gonna be doing here shortly. And then you would remove the cinnamon stick. That's if you want a little bit sweeter, okay? All right, so far that's 2 of them. I'm gonna do one more. Add in mustard seed. You can add in fennel. If you've heard of fenugreek seeds, you can add those in. I would use those sparingly, just a small amount. Dill, any of those. Okay. So far, this has gotten me about 3 mason jar fulls full. Add the beets. Sliced garlic. Now, what's going to happen is after we add in the brine, that beet liquid is going to spread into the brine, and it's going to impart its flavor. So this is about 2 pounds of turnips, and then 1 small size beet. They have been peeled and chopped into batons. Small little French fry looking things. What I've added is I've added about 2 cloves of garlic. Okay, so 3/4 of the way filled with turnip, 1/4 of the way filled with beets. I've added coriander seed, about 1/2 teaspoon of coriander seed, and I've added in about 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. You can add in serrano pepper, any of those, if you like it spicy. Otherwise, leave it out. You do not have to do that if you don't want to. All right, so I got those in, and then peppercorns got in. Great, okay. And then coriander seed in that one, because I like coriander seed. Okay. We have our jars ready for the brine. Okay, let's talk about water. So I have this set up here. Okay, I've already done a pre-made brine. Jihan said, I like all your additions. I love to eat it on the side of falafel with tahini sauce. Yes, you are absolutely right. That sounds amazing. Okay, so this is the pot that I use. I've already made brine, so that way we can easily go through it, but I'm going to go through the steps. You're going to add your bay leaves first. So I have a spice box here. I'm going to take 2 bay leaves because I'm making more pickles. I don't mind making too much brine. Okay, so bay leaves, and then you're going to use 3 cups of water for the 3 mason jars. And you may want to make more just to be safe. Okay, so I'm doing this single-handedly. I'm just going to estimate 1, 2, 3, and off. Okay. You're going to bring that water temperature on medium heat so that it warms up, and then we're going to add in kosher salt. Now, I'm using tap water. It is okay to use tap water if you are bringing it up for this type of pickle because it's using vinegar. All right, and then you're heating the water, so if there's chlorine in there, hopefully it off gases into the air. Now, if you're doing a type of pickle where you're relying less on the vinegar, like kimchi comes to mind, things like that, you don't want to use a chlorinated water. You would want to, that's not blood, that is beet juice. You would want to leave it out overnight and let all the chlorination off gas, or you would want to use spring water. You can use spring water with this and it'll probably turn out just great, right? But understand that for this type of pickle, the tap water is okay. If you're doing something like kimchi or one of these others that is really, really, really dependent upon the culture that you're making and less on the vinegar, you would want to use spring water. Okay, so I just added in 1/3 cup of kosher salt. Now, this is something that you cannot compromise on. You need to have a salt that does not have any iodine in it. So the table salt that we use has iodine in it. It will not work. It will make your pickles taste nasty. So you want to use kosher salt, sea salt, nothing that has iodine added to it. All right, so we're going to bring this up in heat. And then as we do this, you want to get the bay leaves to submerge and you want to start to stir it. And what's going to happen is that salt is going to be absorbed into the water as the temperature increases. Okay, once you can't see the salt at the bottom of the pot, you know that it is okay and it can be used. You want to cool the water off. Okay. So we're going to give that a few more stirs. See how it's starting to absorb into the water as it's warming up. This way. So right now it's on a medium to high heat, but you're keeping an eye on it because you don't want it to get too hot. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of time just waiting for it to cool down, just enough so that that salt starts to disappear. Do you see how that's disappearing and the liquid is becoming clearer? All right, so that is now gone. The salt has been absorbed. I'm going to turn the heat off and I'm going to let this cool down. Now that's going to cool. It needs to come down to at least where you can place your hand in it and not feel like you're going to get burnt, right? I have already pre-done this right before this cooking demo, so that way we can just move directly into the pickling part. Okay, so I have a funnel that's going to help me pour this stuff in. So I put that there, and then I have my brine that I've already made. We need to add 1 cup of vinegar to this solution. So, got that out of the thing. And pour it in. Okay, so 1 cup vinegar goes on into our brine, and you're going to give it a good stir. And I'm going to ladle this in so that way I can do it single-handed. I wasn't expecting to have my camera app not work. So, usually I would just pour this in from the pot after it's cooled. Okay, so I'm going to set that in. And pour it in. Now you can take the bay leaf off after it's cooled down. You can take that out. You don't have to leave it in. I actually enjoy the bay leaf taste, so I leave it in with the brine as it pickles. And I'm not going to add this to all of them, so that way we can move on to the fennel and be time conscious. Okay, you want to take your brine and fill it all the way to the top. So that way when you close this, there's going to be very, very, very little left over. Now, if you ran out of brine, you can top this off with water. Okay, I'm going to add the bay leaf to this. And top it off. Because you want to have some, like just a little, you want to reduce the amount of air. Not too much, just a thin layer, and then you cap that. Okay. And you will shake it around, let all the spices get in there, and then you set this on the counter. The instructions say 4 to 5 days. Now, we live in Houston, most of us, And our elevation is really, really, really near sea level, right? And if you make fermented products, you're going to notice that fermentation happens really, really quick here. We're hot, humid, near sea level. So I have left mine at 3 days and it's been ready. How do you know? You're going to see all these little bubbles start to form. Now I don't have one that's already been made because I eat these really quickly. But you will, when you turn it, if you go and you check it and you turn it around, you're going to see these little bubbles start to form on the jar. And that's usually an indication like, okay, this is good, right? Usually by the 3rd day, it's ready to be put in the fridge. I wouldn't leave it out more than 5 days. That fermentation process is going on and it's going to make it sour and crunchy and delicious. And it's going to soften the turnips. If you don't leave it out long enough and you bite into this, you put it in the fridge and you bite into it, if the turnips haven't fermented, they're going to kind of taste vegetal and not so yummy. So 3 to 5 days in Houston, okay? And then after that, so you leave this at room temperature on the counter. After that, you put it in the fridge and it will be good to go. All right. I'm going to move on to the pickled fennel. I'll do this later with the brine. Okay, pickled fennel. Now that I need to, give me 1 moment to rinse. I'm going to turn the camera back to face the other way. And I need to rinse the chopping board or change it out because I don't want to get the beets juice all into the fennel and have it be this pink color. And we'll be good to go. How many of you have cooked with fennel before? Anyone? You can type it in the chat comments or.
This is my very first time ever.
Very first time.
Fennel of any part of the fennel I have never used.
Really? Okay. It's a very cool product. Let's see. Rachel says I can make the brine and pickle other vegetables like cauliflower, celery, bell pepper. I eat fennel all the time. Yeah, you can make the same brine and use the same. Yeah. Okay. Real fast about fennel. All the parts are apparently edible. When we make this today, the outer part can be a little rough. So as we chop through it, you may want to pull off. If you have a really big bulb that's really thick, you may want to pull it off. This one's a smaller one, so it's probably going to be okay and more tender. It literally looks like celery that went crazy, right, with its little fingerlings coming off. You want to rinse everything off and you want to slice off any dark parts. So I will save this so that way you can see. I'm going to slice that part off. And I'm going to rinse it again. Okay. And this bottom part here, see that? We want to slice that off. Yeah, see, Rachel says, I like to eat fennel raw with some olive oil, salt, and pepper. That sounds delicious. Gigi, do you, when you eat the fennel raw, how do you slice it? Do you typically like just coin it or do you make it in little strands? How do you do that? I'm curious.
I usually do well, not across round, the other way.
The other way? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So for our recipe, we are going to cut off these outgrowths, okay, the part that looks like celery. And you're going to reserve that. You can place that into the pickle. I'm going to switch camera views so that way you can see what it is that I'm doing. Give me a second. That one. it keeps wanting to go to the camera that's not working. I love Zoom. I'm sure you'll do too. Everything has been different since switching to Zoom. Sometimes it wants to work, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so good. You can see the chopping board. Okay, so this was a rough outer part that I had removed. Okay, and so I'm chopping off the parts of the fennel that look kind of like celery stalks, and you're going to save those. Okay. We will add some of these into the pickle part. Okay, so this stem part I'm going to cut off because it's a little bit rougher than the rest. So what I am left with is this bulb. And what we're going to do is if you had a mandolin, you would connect that and then you would slice it into 1/8 of an inch in width. We are going to cut this way into coins. I'm going to do it really quickly, and we're going to add it into the mason jar. Okay, so it's going to be 1/8 of an inch. See if you can see me when I'm cutting. Yeah, you can. Okay, great. Okay, so this is going to go by pretty quick. Once again, let's go over knife basics. So here's the knife handle. Okay, hand goes on. You hold here at the blade, other fingers go here. So that way you're using your arm and your wrist is stable and you have more control. Okay. So I'm just slicing down about 1/8 of an inch in width. And as I do this, as I have some of these, okay, I can probably go a little bit narrower. Let's see, there, a little bit narrower than that, but that's pretty good. You just add those into your mason jar. And as you chop this, you're going to notice it has a licorice type smell, anise type smell to it, and it's lovely. Like I said, it was like celery and licorice had a baby. It's a wonderful plant to cook with, and I'm looking forward to next week when we do a sautéed fennel with garlic. You're going to notice that fennel is paired with garlic. Okay, so I have chopped that, and I'm going to add these to the mason jar. And they're pretty thin. Now this water mixture, the brine, it's less saline than the one that we made for the turnips. Okay, and we actually add sugar to this one. Okay, so you pack it in, and then you want to cut a few of these up and pack it in with it. Now there's probably not going to be room for all of it, and that's okay. Just enough, it's aesthetically pleasing, but remember you're going to have to fish this out, so I would leave some room so that way this can float to the top and you can push these down. These are full of flavor, so that's why you want to add some of them, but it's not crucial that you get every single part in this. You can save this, you can make stock with it, you can compost it, you can use it in a salad. Remember, these parts are edible. Okay, next. Here I have some slices, or it's a little bit of cuts from lemon peel, and you want to get as much of that white pith off as best you can. So I have some that I've cut. I'm going to use these, just a few. This is probably about a quarter teaspoon if I were to chop it up. I'm going to add those in so it imparts a little bit of lemon flavor. Next, you're going to add peppercorns. About a half teaspoon of peppercorn goes into this. If you like pepper, add more. Which I like pepper. I'm going to add more. All right, so peppercorns are in. Next, you want to add some yellow mustard seeds. I don't have yellow mustard today, so I'm going to use black mustard. So black mustard seeds. And once again, if you're exploring this for the first time, I would probably follow along with what the recipe says first, make a batch, and then after that, go and be adventurous and explore what you want to add in. Okay, lastly, we want to add in some fennel seeds. So here I have fennel seeds. And remember, we learned today that you can have these after a meal and it will help with your digestion. And you're gonna add in half a teaspoon, okay? So we got all our seasonings in. It's time to make our brine. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to let me pour the water in first and then we'll go from there, okay? This is one where you're going to have both the vinegar and the water together, and you're going to heat them up. Remember, with the turnips, you heated the water up to absorb the salt, then you added the vinegar afterwards. With the fennel, you can use the apple cider vinegar, and that's going to impart a really delicious flavor. But if you don't have this, white wine vinegar is going to be just as fine. Okay, let me see if there were any comments so far. I missed. Okay, all right, so first, let me pour the water in and then we'll go from there. Okay, so it's going to be a cup and 1/4 cup of water. And once I get this in, I'll switch over to the camera so that you can see what it is that I'm doing. Let me pour the vinegar real fast. Sugar ready, so you can see. And then we will go to the stove. Okay, if you're using apple vinegar, you kind of want to shake it up a bit before you add it in. All right, I'm going to switch cameras and we're going to go. Or actually, I'm just going to pick this up. Here we go. We got a cup and 1/4 of water. Okay, to that, I'm going to use a cup and 1/4 of apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar may have a mother. It's a culture floating in it. So if you see that, you want to pull that out. White wine vinegar will less likely have that. And that culture's, it doesn't mean it's bad. It means that it's alive. Nothing to worry. Okay, and that's what allows us to make vinegar. Those cultures. Okay, so I added a cup and 1/4 of this apple cider vinegar, and you're going to stir that together. I have this on medium heat. Okay, and to that, you're going to add a teaspoon of sugar. So this is a 1/4 teaspoon that I have right here. I'm going to add those in. 2, 3, 4. And then a teaspoon of salt. And notice that this doesn't have as much salt in it as the turnips. Okay. Alrighty. Stir that around. And because we don't have that much salt or sugar, this is going to absorb fairly quickly. Now this is a quick pickle, so we're actually going to bring this up to pretty much a boil. And then you're going to use your fennel, or you're going to pour it directly into the fennel. It's going to cook it a little bit. Okay, so this is one where we're riding more on the vinegar. Okay, so less on fermentation, more on the vinegar, even though it'll probably ferment. It's not going to kill everything. So I'm going to increase the heat so we get up there a little bit faster. Okay, while that's doing that, I'm going to get my fennel jar. And while we're waiting on that to boil, let me switch over to talking about sourdough. Front camera. And once again, it wants to go to the camera that's not working today. I don't know why Zoom likes to do that. There you go. Okay. So for sourdough, you are going to use a mason jar. What I would recommend, so we're waiting on the water liquid mixture to boil. I would recommend that if you're going to use a mason jar, that you use one of these wide mouth mason jars in comparison to the more narrow ones. And the reason why is that when you make a starter, you're going to be adding flour and water to feed your starter over time. Oh, thanks, Susan. Take care. So that is going to be important, because if you have a narrow opening, this is going to be very, very tricky to do. All right. It's going to be, you're going to spill flour all over your work area and you're going to get frustrated. So wide is preferable. When you make your sourdough starter, you can cover this with paper towel initially, and it's going to be okay. You just don't want that paper towel to come in contact with your culture, because it's going to provide, the paper towel is a reservoir for bacteria that we don't want. Okay, I would recommend that instead you use one of these reusable, I can say it, reusable mesh vegetable bags. This is great, or you can use a cheesecloth. Just don't let the cheesecloth come in contact with your culture. You're going to use a rubber band, or you can take off this little lip part and just use the metal surface. So you would put your paper towel and then rubber band or something, and then, paper towel, rubber band it, or you can just put paper towel or cheesecloth or that mesh and put that there. Okay, we're going to go over how to start your culture in a moment. I can hear that this is starting to boil. Let's check it out. So that is what we have so far. Whew. We're going to turn that off, and we're going to take it off, and let's pour it in. Switching camera views again. Rear camera. There we go. And I'm gonna use my funnel so I don't mess this up. And we're gonna pour that in. If you don't have enough liquid, you can fill with water. So I'm going to fill that up with water. And you want it to get over all of the vegetable part. Okay, so fill that. You let it come to room temperature on the counter, and then you can put it in the fridge. This is one where you don't leave out. This is one where you want it to go into the fridge. Okay, so look at that. Here we go. We got our 2 pickles. So we had the turnip pickle. See how that beet juice is coming in there, and it's going to be absorbed into the turnip, and it's going to make it this beautiful pink color. And this is the fennel. So this one here, the pink one, you leave out on the counter for 3 to 5 days. This one here, you leave until it's at room temperature. It's no longer hot, then you put it in the fridge. This one, after 3 to 5 days, put it in the fridge. Both are good for about a month Actually, this one I've had up to 3 months, and it just gets better with time. I would probably not go beyond 3 months with this. Okay. Actually, I would say once you have this one, you're not going to get to more than a month. You're going to be eating them like crazy because they're so good. All right. All right. Any questions on the pickles before we go back to the sourdough? Let's see, Rachel says, I make fennel the same like you made with the subji and add fennel bulb and leaves with other vegetables, and I add it to soups also. That sounds good. So remember, we did subji as one of our second recipes. So Rachel, you just chop the fennel up, and then you add like the mustard seeds and to some oil. Yep, mustard seeds, cumin, and then you saute it. And then once it's cooked, do you add yogurt to it as well? No, you just eat it sauteed with the spices. Oh, that sounds really good. Okay, I'm going to switch back to front view so we can talk about the sourdough. Okay, sourdough. So thank you for your patience with the camera today. For the sourdough, we were talking about the type of mason jar you want. You want typically the wide jar. If you don't have it, that's okay. You can go forward with the narrow jar, and you will be just fine. You need paper towel, cheesecloth, or one of those meshes. And that's important because you want the culture to be able to breathe and exchange. It's what, it needs to be able to pull in oxygen and different gases. So that way it starts to take a hold of the mixture that it's in and become very strong. All right, you are going to be essentially growing a culture that has yeast, natural occurring yeast that is probably already on your bread flour, and lactobacillus. Lactobacillus, it may be on the culture, it may be on your hands, humans have it, and they're going to create a symbiotic culture, or if they haven't already, in the bread flour, and that is what's going to lead to our sourdough. And it's so important because if you're someone who typically is really reactive to bread, like let's say you eat bread and it causes you to have stomach problems, sourdough may be a beneficial choice for you. Also, if you're someone who's watching your blood sugars or sourdough, the culture changes the level of carbohydrate that's in the bread flour. And if you've heard of the glycemic index, it actually lowers the bread flour's glycemic index a little bit. So it's more usable for individuals who are looking to watch their blood glucose levels. All right, let's talk about what to do. All right, you're going to need to have a scale of some sort. I'm using this multi-purpose scale. Okay, and typically when we do sourdough stuff, we use metric system. You can use the good old whatever system, but metric is going to be easier, so you're not having to do multiple calculations in your head, and it's just quick, easy whenever you feed your culture. Okay, next, what you're going to need. You're going to need some sort of all-purpose flour or bread flour. Either is fine. There are gluten-free sourdough cultures out there. I have yet to make it, so I don't feel comfortable talking about it. So I heard that there's one that you can do with that lupine flour that we used last week, but I haven't done it before. I haven't experienced that, so don't quote me on that. So there is apparently gluten-free sourdough cultures that you can make. All right, so this is wheat flour, all-purpose flour, okay? And then you're going to need water. In general, you can use tap water. It's going to be fine. What I typically do, though, is I put water in a kettle and leave it out overnight. So that way, if there was any chlorination, it hopefully is off-gassed into the air, and that water is just primarily water, okay? This is what you're going to do. Use your, I'm using white flour. You can make a culture from whole wheat flour, But the rule of thumb is what bread you make in the future, your culture has to be made from that same flour that you use. So if you like whole wheat, you can use whole wheat, but expect that your whole wheat culture will be used with whole wheat flour in the future. Same thing with white bread flour. If you make white bread, you are going to need to use a white bread culture. It may be able to cross, it may be, and that's fine, but you typically want to match the two cultures. All right. First thing, you're going to use 75 grams of bread flour into your mason jar. So this is the beginning. I'm going to switch this over to the front view so that way you can see what it is I'm doing. It wants to do the same camera again for some reason. Start video. Okay, there I have my scale. You put the mason jar on. You are going to turn it on and set it to grams. All right. We have our wheat flour. You're going to add 75 grams wheat flour to your mason jar. This is a process that's going to take about a week. It's not going to happen overnight. Okay, so that's 75 grams. Then you're going to pour, so you can zero this out, or you can just go up to 150 grams, but you're going to add a 1-to-1 ratio. So I have 75 grams of flour in here. I'm going to add 75 grams of water. So I'm going to add a total of 150 grams of substance. So 75 of flour, 75 of water. And you, with the water, you want to keep an eye on the scale because that's going to go up really quickly with the water. All right, so I have 150. Next, you want to use something that is wooden, something that is plastic, something that is not metal. You want to avoid metal with sourdough. You don't want it to come in contact with your solution of flour and water. And you're going to stir that. Let me go from a side view to a front view so you can see what it is that I'm doing. So you're going to stir, set this down this way. Sorry, cameras. There we go. You're going to stir that until it's mixed and it looks kind of like yogurt almost. All right. Once that's done, you let this sit out at room temperature. Now, are we going to close this up? We're not going to put a lid on it. We're going to put the cheesecloth or some type of mesh on it, and then we seal it, okay? And you want this to sit out for 24 hours. After 24 hours, what are you going to do? You're going to dump out half of it. What? Yes, dump it out and do not use that. It's not ready yet, and you don't want to cook with it either, because you don't know what's been growing in there, okay? You want to dump out half of this. So this is after 24 hours of it being covered by that mesh, so no bugs can get into it, okay? But that mesh allows it to breathe and come in contact with the outside air. You want to dump out half of this, and then you want to feed it again. Feed it with another round of 75 grams of flour and 75 grams of water. Stir it. Let it sit for 24 hours and do the same process again. What you're going to notice is that these little bubbles will start to form if it's alive. You will not see bubbles if it is dead. It will start to smell sour if it's alive over time. Okay. If it starts to grow like little blue fingered fuzzies or green fuzzies, that means dump it out. Okay. What's going to happen if you have a live culture of yeast and lactobacillus? That's going to eventually take over, and it's going to crowd out any of the bad bugs that we don't want. like the molds and all the nasty stuff. Okay, it will grow faster than them, and it will crowd them out. And the more you, so every 24 hours for 7 days, you dump this out, dump out half of it, feed it with 75 grams of flour, 75 grams of water. Okay, let that sit, dump out half of it, feed it. Okay, and for 7 days in a row. If it's alive, it will start to bubble. So if you're going to do this, I would recommend that you start this now. So that way in 2 weeks, you have a culture that's pretty strong that we can use for when we do sourdough. Okay, what's going to eventually look like? So this is my sourdough starter that I've had for a while. Okay, as you can see, I have a wide mouth mason jar, and I'm using the mesh. Let me pop this off so that way you can see what it looks like inside. Give me a moment. Okay. What you notice there, see those bubbles? That is gas. That is CO2 coming up as it eats the sugars, starches in the flour. And there's a thin layer of liquid that's clear. It can be almost gray in color. That's a good sign. That's called hooch. And it's a vinegar. Don't be worried if that forms on top of your sourdough starter. All you do is you just stir it back in and it's okay. All right. You would discard it if you see blue or green fuzzies, or if you see something that looks really black floating on the surface. That's when you dump it out. Now it can be brown, it can be gray, it can be white. Those are fine. But blue, green, or black that usually forms in a circle, those are not good. Dump the starter out, start again. All right. So if you're going to follow along with sourdough, you need to feed this for 7 days until you start to see bubbles form, and it becomes very much, see how runny, like yogurt-like it is? See, that is a good sign, okay? After 7 days, you can put it in the fridge and feed it once a week, and it's going to be fine. All right. Any questions now? Let me turn this. Let's say you do pickles differently. Feel free to chime in. Okay. So this is a lot of fun to do. Once again, for your turnip pickles, leave them out for 3 to 5 days on your counter, then put them into the fridge. For the fennel pickles, go ahead and put them in the fridge once it's cooled off to room temperature. And the fennel pickles will be ready in about 2 to 3 days, maybe even tomorrow. The turnip pickles, I would let them sit in the fridge for at least a week after you put them in there. So we're talking like 3 to 5 days out on the countertop, then in the fridge for a week. So you're looking at like a week and a half before you really want to eat them, and they'll be really good. Okay, chop them up, use them in a salad, use them with chicken, really good. Okay, any questions? All right. I want to thank each of you for joining tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Next week is sauteed fennel with garlic, and we're gonna check in with their sourdough starters for those of you who are following along. So have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. That was